Hey, welcome to Ashes to Ruby's channel. This is an episode of Rehablife where we talk about recovery, addiction recovery, and all things in between. I'd like to thank our corporate sponsors, Carlington Booch, the world's best original kombucha, small batch, traditional, all naturally carbonated, handcrafted flavors and all that good stuff. It's good for your gut and it's good for our communities because they give back to people like us. And so I would like to thank Carlington Booch as our sponsor and Union City Church to be able to make this all possible. And so we got, in the background, we got our friend Josh Beatty.
What's happening?
Hey, what's that? Is that all you got to say?
What's your... Yeah, that's all I got.
That's all he's got right now.
I was going to ask, what's your name?
What's your name? My name is John Ruby.
Yep.
Welcome. And then we got Shawn.
Shawn Haley.
How you doing, Shawn Haley?
Good.
Where did we meet? When did we meet?
Yeah, we met.
Have we met?
No.
We met before.
A couple of times before. A few
we
years
were
ago
just
we
talking
met.
about that, and you said
maybe Union City Church, most likely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I went to one of your.
And you told me you didn't like me. Is that what you said?
No,
Something like that?
I wasn't a big fan at first because I was just finding. You want to know why?
Yeah.
I think
why,
I told you
why.
Yeah, I was just finding Jesus, and I thought you were too much of a mix between Jesus and recovery. And, I really like. Wow, this guy's stretching, pushing the lines and stretching it a little bit,
pushing the lines.
But I realized that. Yeah, Jesus works in many different ways. I didn't know Jesus then,
He can speak through a donkey, and
He can speak through Ruby too.
He can speak through it. And so, just tell me about your journey in recovery. Where are you at with it?
Well, actually, next week on the 2nd, 3 years consecutive sobriety, clean time.
Yeah,
congrats, man.
Come on,
awesome.
Hand over there, Josh. Come on. Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, Josh. Josh is his name?
Yeah.
I don't know that guy. No, yeah. So I've been trying to get sober since 2007. My first treatment center. I went to multiple treatment centers. So
2007 isn't 3 years ago.
No, it isn't 3 years ago.
So how long is 2007?
That's 13 years ago,
so
dude.
13 years ago, you tried to get sober.
Yes.
And what were you trying to get sober from?
At that point, it was just I was doing pills, a lot of club scene.
Pills,
doing
what kind of pills?
Ecstasy and speed, and we were into GHB back then. And
not the Flintstones.
No, it wasn't Flintstone. Well, actually, there was an ecstasy pill called Flintstones. I think there was one.
Of course, there is.
They had everything, but no, I went to I went to treatment there for the first time, and I went to 12 treatment centers since then. And 5 years ago was the last time I went to a treatment center. And it still didn't work. I got out, I relapsed, and shortly after there I met my now sponsor and started on the journey of recovery rather than just sobriety. And now 3 years, I had a little slip 18 months in, and 3 years later, completely recovered.
So you got 3 years of abstinence.
Yes.
And recovery, and you would say you're recovered.
Yes, I'm recovered.
And so what does that mean that you're recovered, or what does it mean that you're in recovery?
Okay, so
what's the difference?
I guess this is my opinion only too, but recovery would be living a new way of life and learning how to live life, not just without drugs and alcohol, but how to live life properly. I'm recovering from not the disease of alcoholism or addiction, but I'm recovering from just being a messed up human being, right? And that's the difference between sobriety and recovery, right? Sobriety can happen very easily without me making any change, but recovery means I have to change, and recovery is for the long haul.
So then what didn't you get before? If you've been trying to get sober since 2007, do you just like rehab? Like, is that like a Club Med, and it's like some people go on cruises, you just go to rehab centers, or what were you missing? And describe, you said disease, what does that actually mean?
Well, ironically, first I did like rehab because it was the only time I wasn't using. So that for that facet, I liked rehab because
you actually didn't like using.
No, I was stuck. By the end of it, anyways, I was using drugs against my own willpower, against my own desire, and I could say maybe not in 2007, but after 2007, my next rehab was in 2011. And in 2011, I really didn't want to use anymore, and I really wanted to quit. And I could say with my whole heart I wanted to, but I still wasn't able to. It wasn't enough until I started doing this recovery journey. Right? What was the second question you asked there? I think
I don't know what was your.
We're just too enthralled in your answer.
I'm just so intrigued by what you're saying now.
What is so then?
Oh, what's different? What happened?
Yeah, what was the turning point? Or you just got sick of going to rehab? Wasn't all it was cracked out to be?
No.
And then why, like you said, you didn't like using. you didn't like using, but you continued to use. So most people would say, well, if you're doing something over and over and repeatedly, you must like doing it.
Yeah.
So what does that mean that you don't like doing it and you kept doing it anyway?
Yeah, well, that actually answers the disease question, I guess. It's a disease/illness of addiction, alcoholism. It's saying that our minds and our bodies are different, and it's kind of like an allergy. So we say if I'm allergic to bees, I don't go near bees, right? But the difference between a disease allergy is it has an obsession of the mind, which just makes me forget that I'm allergic to bees or drugs in this case, right? So I keep going back even though I don't want to. I forget how bad it actually was. Not to mention my life is so messed up and my thoughts are so messed up and my feelings are so out of whack. I just don't want to be a part of life anymore. So I have that solution. And I guess the turning point is realizing that there is a solution that's even better than drugs and alcohol. That would be God, but learning how to find him, right?
And that's what in 2005, when I was hopeless on the streets of Ottawa, I got into a treatment center and they said that my alcohol and drugs weren't my problem.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if that's not my problem, like I'm crazier than I think I am. And it's like, this is why I'm here. This is my problem. So what do you mean by that? You kind of have the same thought that I had.
Yeah, well, I don't like that saying too much there because I think alcohol and drugs are a part of the problem. They're not the whole problem, right? But the problem is me. The problem is that I don't have any coping skills. I don't have any life skills. I don't have any power within me to say no to them, right? The problem is that I'm fearful. I'm afraid everyone's gonna hate me or talk about me. And my only solution to avoid all that, well, not my only solution, but at the time I thought the solution that works every time is the drugs and alcohol. And the reason there's also the problem is because every time I use drugs and alcohol, people actually start hating me even more. So like my fears come to truth, right? So I'm afraid that people hate me. So I use drugs and then people actually start hating me because I do crappy stuff while I'm on drugs. And then it's just a vicious cycle where I can't get out of it, right?
So then what does recovery look like today? In the last 3 years, what was different from the first 10 years?
We'll go back 5 years because that's when I started, I say recovery. So I'm 3 years sober, but I think I started on a recovery journey the 2 years before that when I had 18 months. And surrender, basically, right? So 7 years in and out of the rooms. So the rooms being AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and Narcotics Anonymous. Rooms, they give you a set of guidelines to get better and to maybe find a relationship with a higher power or a God of your understanding. And 7 years in and out, I didn't really want to follow those guidelines. I wanted to pick and choose which ones I wanted to do.
Like a buffet.
Yeah, exactly. You like buffets?
I've been to a buffet or two in my life.
Only for 6 hours every day. That you like buffets.
Yeah.
So yeah, we go. 5 years ago, I stopped trying to pick and choose, right? I had a sponsor who kind of, a sponsor, so the program also offers sponsorship. So guys who have been through the program and who have recovered or who are in recovery to help you through. And so they guide individuals. And the one I got was pretty much hands-on, no holds bar. He said, you do this or you're not going to make it. And that's what I needed. Where the 7 years before that, I listened to people who said these are suggestions and you can do them if you want to, but I needed to be told that, well, the truth is I had to do them, right? There was no suggestion for me. The hopeless alcoholic addict that I am, I need everything in order to recover, everything that program has to offer, which is basically clean up me so I can find a power, which is God, to help me stay sober, because I can't do it on my own. I can't even live on my own, right? So I don't need the power to stay sober, but I need the power to learn how to live and to make life decisions, to run my family, to decide whether I'm going to come here and do this interview or not.
Beautiful. So the first 10 years, it was that wrestling match of what do I really need to stay sober? And that was power. You were powerless over your addiction. The solution is to get power. So why did you start using in the first place? Like, did you never have power, or how did you start using? Like, when did you start using? What did you just go right into the drugs, or what was the entry point of your using?
Yeah, it's actually a good question for me because a lot of people, it has to do with trauma and stuff like that. But for me, it wasn't. Well, I guess you could call it trauma in a sense, but we moved around a lot as kids, and I'm a big time 5-pin bowler, so I was bowling all the time, and we lived in a small town, or a pretty small city of Oshawa, and there was one bowling alley. So we move around in the city, and there was always people at the bowling alley who knew me because I was the best bowler in the town, so they would become my friends. And then we moved to Ottawa, a much bigger city, and there's lots of bowling alleys. So, and I'm also 16 at this point. So, rather than being liked for being a good bowler, I was disliked because I was stealing all the awards and stuff. So, I was put in a position where I had to make friends without having my bowling tool to do it, and I didn't know how to make friends, right? And I had smoked weed once or twice before that. I had drinking a few times. No allergy, no
What
obsession.
What age were you?
16, 17 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, so no allergy, no obsession at that point, but I went to, after the third time moving in Ottawa, instead of trying to make friends the hard way, I went to the smoking section and bought a couple grams of weed for some guys who smoked weed, and we smoked at school. And unfortunately for me, well, fortunately in the long run, but unfortunately for me, the guys who smoke at school do other stuff on the weekends, right? So I got involved in this crowd that started doing shrooms and acid and partying on the weekend. And again, I would say a year, maybe 3/4 of a year before I believe I crossed the line where there was no turning back. I needed drugs and alcohol to function or to have a good time, what I thought, right? The only good time I knew at that point was after a year of doing it was with drugs and alcohol. So it became, it went from being just a tool to make friends to a tool to have fun to, I don't know what else to do with my life.
And did you know that at that time? Like, do you think you could identify it? Like, this owns me?
Yeah, I thought I was choosing to. I thought it was a choice of mine right up until maybe 27 in that first treatment center, right? I moved back to Oshawa where I came from because I knew it was getting bad. And I remember one time my best friend, he's still the best friend I ever had, he's still out there using, but he said to me, we always said, well, we're going to take a little break. We're going to take a little break this weekend. We're not going to use this weekend. He said, you know you're an addict when you say you need to take a break, because normal people don't say they need to take a break. They just take a break, or they don't have to say that, right? And that hit me in the head, right? It sunk in. I'm like, wow, maybe I'm an addict, right? And I'm like, okay, well, let's go drink some more.
And how old were you then?
About it. 27, 26. Okay. 20, maybe 25 when he made that joke, but by the time it's 27, I could really see it that my life was unmanageable because of drugs and alcohol, and I couldn't control my life. I couldn't live without drugs, but I couldn't live with drugs either, right? So I needed to do something, so I moved back to Oshawa, the classic geographical cure, they call it, and fortunately, like we talked about earlier, I brought me with me, so the problem came, and even though the drugs weren't there at first, they eventually showed up. They showed up. Mm-hmm. I found them, and I was just as bad in a year in Oshawa as I was 7 years in Ottawa. Right?
And so you kind of talked environmental, going to the cool kids, and there was a progression of usage because of who you hung out with. And then you realize you're not the same as you're using differently than other people.
Yeah.
Other people can leave it or take it or enjoy it. And then with you, it becomes problematic and you lose the luxury of choice, whether you're doing it or not. So what did you do for work in this era? Were you able to work? Were you able to be functional? Did you finish your post-secondary?
Grade 10 education. So I dropped out of school. Basically, I started working to support my weed and minor cocaine habit at the time. I dropped out of school, in the summer actually, I started an overnight job. So I was working from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. So when I went back to school that year, I asked them if I could do afternoons, and they said, sure, no problem. But we would smoke weed at the school, and I wouldn't quite want to go to school. And I dropped out in grade 10 and never went back. As for work, it was restaurant fields, whichever field could support my using habit. And I worked in bars and strip clubs for a friendly organization that we used to.
You were a shooter girl.
I was a shooter girl. Shooter girl, yeah. So I did what I could do best, right? I knew about drugs. That's about all I knew about. So I got into bartending. I got into selling drugs, basically, in the bars. And so I could use anytime I wanted to, and I had full access to anything I wanted. And so it was a pretty good lifestyle for a while. Mm-hmm, so I thought, right? I thought I had the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous talks about arriving. It felt like I had arrived. Like my thing for using was to make friends, and next thing you know, I was the most popular person in this bar because I was the drug dealer of that bar. So what I wanted for myself, I had fulfilled, right? What now I have fulfilled in God, I had fulfilled then in praise and respect from other people.
Well, and that was your biggest longing growing up too, though, with all the bowling stuff, right? Like just wanting to be noticed and just trying to make friends and trying to get the approval from people.
Right.
So at 27 was that was your first treatment center then?
Yeah, I was coming back from Oshawa. I called my parents crying from Oshawa, said, take me home. And they said, if you're going to come home, you're going to go to rehab. So I went to rehab because they wanted me to, not because I wanted to. But that's when I learned about this illness and learned that I was a little different from other people. But my sick brain turned that around to say that, well, I'm different from other people, so I'm going to be doing this the rest of my life. And I went back out for 4 years till 2011. And then that's when I hit like what I would call my bottom, the lowest point I'd ever been. And I was outside, I was homeless, staying at the Mission downtown. And I remember, should I go into this scenario?
Yeah, man, go. It's a great place. That down at a homeless shelter.
I thought it was an okay place, right? So anyways, I'm sitting there one day after a binge, and outside the Mission, they have these smoking areas, and there's like 3 separate smoking areas, and I'm in the far right. And I look to the far left, and there's these dealers. And I was saying to myself, I'm trying to figure out where my life or where my place in the Mission is going to be. And I said, well, I could be the dealers. Maybe I could take that on. And then in the middle section, there was these people. They seemed to be long-time Mission goers. They lived there for a while, and they were content with living a homeless life at the Mission. Right? And you could see them. They were happy, and they were talking, and they were okay with that. And then I looked in mine, and there was this mentally ill guy. He was like roaming around for cigarette butts, right? And I said, well, that could be me too. And I'm like, in the midst of it, I just had this, I don't know, epiphany. But I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, not that those people are sick, not that they're bad people, but I'm trying to plan a life where I'm gonna be living at the Mission for the rest of my life. I said, no, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. And I realized that how bad my life had actually gotten. I thought I was choosing all this stuff for my life. And then when I had to make a choice, and like when I really had to make a choice, I decided, no, I called detox, and I went to my second treatment center at the time. And
good for you, man.
Still didn't work.
So then when you're talking kind of like this progression and rock bottom, that means there was a process to get there. And I always heard rock bottom is death for most of us. I think rock bottom is when you put the shovel down.
Sure.
And so explain the progression of what you were talking about. Because like most people that have an illness or a disease, there's a diagnosis.
Yeah.
So were you diagnosed at 18 or 19 or 20? And is it because it's a little bit trickier to diagnose? Did you start with the illness, or did you grow into the illness, disease? Explain that. Like, talk about that.
I kind of did a little bit already. Funny enough, I was probably diagnosed by everyone else when I was 20 and 21 years old. But I'm sure if there was an actual diagnosis spot, if there was a doctor that would say you have become an addict, it would be in the 20 age group. I was about 20 and. But it's still fun, right? And still enjoying it, right? So for the progression would be this. It'd be like 5 years fun in clubs, what I thought was fun at the time. Fun, clubs, girls, dancing, stuff like that. 2 years, no clubs, but Xbox, same guy, still laughing, stuff like that. But same amount of drugs, just not in a club at someone's house playing Xbox. And then 2 years isolation for me, like really, it started getting worse. And then I found my last drug of choice while I was doing that, while I was all alone, which is crack cocaine. And 1 year of that before it was really, really just off the wall. I had no friends. Fortunately, I have a loving family who would always take me back, but they were done with me too, because I'd always steal off them, right? So they'd take me back, but they would lock me in their basement. Not lock me in their basement, but they would just go in your basement and don't come into our house unless you're here to pick up food or something like that, right? So
yeah, it's a very consumeristic
it took
illness
everything
that we have, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, people lose their patients, you lose family members, you
Yeah.
lose everything that you hold on value.
Well, again, the disease affects them probably more than it affects me, right?
So would you consider yourself a 12-step guy? Like, is that
Yeah.
the process that you've taken?
For sure.
You mentioned that you were powerless, you needed power. The
Yeah.
12 steps led you into that process.
Yeah.
And and you said that you were recovered. What are you recovered from? And then what is the spiritual experience at the end of it? What does that look like?
Right.
What does that mean by spiritual experience?
Okay. Well, I would say I would go to spiritual awakening rather than a spiritual experience, because I think I had a spiritual experience which got me into the 12-step program, right? So an experience with God that, well, I was never able to stop using for a day, right? And then one day, all of a sudden, I'm able to stop using and get myself to detox. And for a guy who went to 12 treatment centers, to think the one time I actually got sober was the time I didn't go to treatment. 5 years ago was the only time I didn't go to treatment, and it actually worked for me. So
Wow.
there's something spiritual in that, right? So as for the steps, like there's 12 steps that you go through just basically to realize how bad it is, realize that my body and my mind are different. I suffer from an illness that says my body, if I take anything mood altering, I'm screwed. I'm not going to stop me until I'm out of money or until I'm in jail or until someone stops me, right? And then after I'm stopped, I have the mind problem, which is, it always brings me back to it, right? Like I said earlier, I forget how bad it was. For some reason, even a week later, I'm not even going to remember that I ended up in detox. I stole my wife's bank card, and she wasn't my wife at the time, but I stole my girlfriend's bank card. I stole off my mom, and I made my mom cry. I remember one night, I was like getting money off my mother, and I still hug her every now and then to try and make up for this. I can never make up for it, right? She's crying. She's like, "You're not using this for drugs." She's bawling. And I said, "I'm using it for drugs, Mom." And I forced her to get me the money, and she was bawling, crying. And but I had no care in the world, right? So I could go a week later, and I would come down from that binge, right? And I'd be so regretful and so remorseful that I did that to my mom. And then 3 days later, I'd be asking my mom for money for drugs again or something like that, right? And just no feelings, no care in the world about it, right? So that's the mind part. It tells me that I don't have a problem, right? Or this time it's going to be different, right? And then there's the spiritual side, which that's where the awakening comes in, I think, right? So the 12 steps, basically, they tell me I have a problem. They give me hope that there's a solution to my problem. They help me clear out some of the crap. So the problem, they say, you need power. That power is God. And yes, it's God. It's not, for me anyway, sorry, I'm a little judgmental on the whole higher power stuff. For me, the big book in Alcoholics Anonymous brings you to God. And whichever God that is for you, that's fine, but it has to bring you to God, right? And God is the power that I need to stay sober. So they tell me I have a problem. They said, you can't solve it. You got to find God. And then they help me do that by clearing up all the crap, all that stuff of wanting to be liked by other people, all that stuff of needing that to feel whole, all this stuff of I'm afraid what everyone thinks, like that. So the steps 4, 5, 6 are clearing me up of that crap, right? And then I go out 8, 9 steps are clearing up, saying sorry to my mom and saying sorry, not sorry, but really like just trying to make it right, trying to make it as though it didn't happen. And then the spiritual experience, I think, comes sometime in there, right? I realize that God is actually working in my life, and somewhere in the process, all of a sudden, I have this conscious contact with Him. And it also helps that I went to church on the side, and I married a Christian woman who had Jesus in her life, so that helped a little bit too. But for me, it wasn't as easy as, okay, there's Jesus, I believe in you, Jesus. It was, I had to do the 12 steps in order to be able to believe in Jesus, be able to really contact Him and be in contact with Him and access the power. So the awakening, the spiritual awakening is a daily thing that I have to keep, right? So I have recovered. I said I recovered from the mind and body thing, right? So my mind no longer tricks me into going back to drugs. I recoil from it, like it says. I have no interest. I could be right beside it and not do it, right? My body's, I don't have that problem anymore because drugs and alcohol aren't in me, right? But the spiritual malady I have because of, I always say because of Adam. It's Adam and Eve, right? I have that malady that's in my human nature. I'm a bad person inside, and I'm always going to revert to human nature. So I needed that spiritual awakening, which is an ongoing thing, to keep the mind and body recovered.
Man, that's a beautiful explanation.
Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is the process of the 12 steps actually gets you to identify that you're powerless, you need power, that other things were your solution, you need God as your solution, and the program of action actually unblocks you, takes all the stuff in here, the fear, the resentment, all this sickness, and gets that out so God can come in and get you plugged in.
Yeah.
Like I have, while you're talking, I have that picture of, I lived in Asia for 9 years of my life, and in Indonesia where we were, there was a lot of earthquakes. Okay. And I remember, I don't know what time it was, but there was an earthquake happening. It was midnight, 3 a.m. And I remember my dad coming in, running, waking us up. Okay. And so dead asleep, wake up, we got to get out of the house. And I remember running down the hall and the whole house is shaking. We get outside and I'm awake. Yeah. And I feel like that's what recovery is. Like, we're sleeping through the earthquake and the trauma, and like we're just asleep through it all.
I think it's great too that your father came and brought you out of it.
Yeah.
Like our father brings us. Flew into that one, right?
Very good, very good. good. So tell me what do you do for a living now? Where are you at?
Yeah,
where are you at in your adulting?
Go back. So I want to ask a question. When
Sure.
you're talking about this spiritual solution and spiritual awakening, was that a tough thing for you to accept coming in? Like, did you have a concept of God before treatment?
Yeah, I had a belief in God. I really am blinded by the people who don't, looking around the world and where did this come from. So I had that fundamental, that basic belief that this came from somewhere, right? I was actually fighting Jesus for the first little while. I remember poor taxi drivers. I would always cry to taxi drivers when I was going to pick up all the time, right? And I remember one of my last binges, I was going to pick up and I was telling him how I was an addict and I don't even want to go do this, but I'm going to do this. And he's like, well, have you tried?
Cab drivers were your therapist.
Yeah. No, they were. This guy was, anyways. So he says, do you know God? Did you ever try God? I told him because I've been in and out of treatments, and he says, well, have you ever tried God as your solution? And I said, well, I tried many times. He's like, well, do you go to church? He says, well, and I said, no, I never really went to church. And he said, well, if you want to talk to God, you got to go to God's house. And so that time around, this is my last treatment center, I started going to this Catholic church, and I was crying every week. I could feel something. I could feel the Spirit of God there, but they were talking about this Jesus person, and I had no interest at all in Jesus. So I think through the 12 steps, it kind of opened my mind to that. And I went to a church, a different church, not a Catholic church, but I went to this other church and joined this group that said ask questions. And I could see people like you and people, I think I was really blessed.
That you didn't like, you know.
People that I didn't like, but I could see that I may not have liked them, but I liked what they were talking about, and you could see they had a spirit. Some kind of like when you go into Alcoholics Anonymous too. You come in and you're like, wow, I want what these guys have. Well, I went into this church group and I saw 12 Christians who had this glow to them, this feeling of joy in them, and we got off track there. Good question.
But that's the experience, right? That's the awakening. We actually feel something different,
right?
And it's not about knowledge. It's not about how much I can memorize out of this book or even the Bible. It's about the experience and the relationship.
Right.
And I remember coming into treatment as well in 2005. And I know what my life is like today. And if they had mentioned that in the beginning of like, you're going to know Jesus, you're going to lead a Sunday school, you're going to actually become an ordained minister and work with drug addicts for 10 years and start a church, I would have punched you in the throat. I would have been like, well, that's hell. But the beautiful thing about recovery, it actually gives us the ability to begin the relationship without my preconceptions. Because I don't want, we don't want our perception or our religion to get in the way of a relationship.
Right. That's exactly it.
And that's the beautiful thing about the program. It's not about like a power grading yourself like a doorknob. You hear that kind of stuff. Yeah. God is the concept that, you know, all powerful, all being, all knowing, all present, that kind of concept that we have come to know that we get into a relationship with. Yeah. So that's a beautiful thing about the program that we're both in. They lead us into relationship. It's really good.
And there's no pressure while they do it, right?
There's no pressure.
Yeah.
Except when there is.
Except when there is. Yeah. Except when I apply it.
So get back to adulting. Where are you with your...
I'm an adult now. So that is a good thing. I think I'm officially 22 or 23.
Isn't that weird in our culture? How did you know you were an adult? Like I grew up in Asia, and you were an adult when you got the... as a male, you got the circumcision.
I thought you were Asian when I first met you. It's not why I didn't like you.
No, that's probably why you didn't like me. Okay, I see where.
That's actually a great question. How did you know when you're?
But in North America, we don't celebrate.
I think it's a line between able. Oh, this is funny because I want to say able to control your life or able to live your life properly, but really able. I'm still not even. Yeah, please do. I'm still not able to do that, so that's kind of a lie. I use God to do that now. So maybe an adult would be someone who can manage their life. That's what I would say. So I've been able to manage my life, but the weird part about that is it's not me who's managing it at all. I'm being guided by my sponsor, by the principles, and by God too, right? So that's
a beautiful concept.
Are we ever adults? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. I feel like I feel like I am an adult now. I'm kind of alone to the consequences that I get to choose. But I love what you're like the first 10 years of your life, of your recovery life. you were actually almost that concept of what you were just saying. You were just trying to fix your life. You weren't trying to get a new life. Right now, you're talking about like, I'm an adult. I have a new life.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm being directed and guided by God. I have a community of people, where before you're at the buffet going, man, I'm in a lot of pain. How about I add a little bit of salad or these fake bacon bits? Those are nice. And I'll do a little bit of this. And it actually gives you pain relief. And that's the thing is, even going to church and, listening to that gospel music and some of that stuff, when we add it to our lives, it actually is a little bit of a pain relief.
Yeah.
But God didn't come to us to be a pain reliever. He came to set us free.
Right. It's still not the solution.
And a lot of people use recovery. A lot of people use, God as pain relief. And the whole point is, the death of self, the death of ego to be raised again to a new life, a new person.
The spiritual.
And so you're a new
awakening.
person. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful conversation to have with a new person.
Yeah.
So what are you doing right now? Like what has the Spirit of God led you into?
A whole bunch of things. So first of all, I'm a dad now. I'm a 1 year. I have a 1 year old boy, which is pretty awesome.
Man, congratulations!
Let's start with that, right?
How old are you?
42, 41, 42, somewhere like that.
I'm 40. I'm 46. I'm 40. How old am I?
47. 48.
Age doesn't matter, though.
Am I 48? No, I think I'm 47.
Age doesn't matter.
I turned in
though.
COVID, so it's like I don't really know
true,
what
too.
age I am. No one celebrated me. Well, it forced people to celebrate me, but it was early COVID, so it wasn't like a. I like to go to Montreal to do a little food experience and stuff, but we couldn't do that.
Okay.
My point is.
Yeah. No, I'm 3 years old. Really, you asked me how old. Ask me how old I am. I'm 3 years. I'm 5 years old, right?
That's a lot of work to have a kid.
But yeah.
My friend Josh has like 3 of them.
So he's 7.
And I'm good for about 4 hours, and then I'm like, all right, gotta go home. I'm exhausted.
Oh, my mind just went really off there. We're gonna cut that part.
No, it's okay.
Okay, yeah. So my life now. So this is a shirt actually from my church. I go to Life Center. And I found Life Center 5 years ago, and now I'm actually head usher at the Life Center Church. I'm doing service for them, right?
Right on.
It said all in for a reason, right? So that's what the new life entails, right? It's trying to go all in good stuff rather than all in drugs. It's going all in helping people, all in serving God, all in helping the next addict and the next alcoholic, right? So my new life, my adult life is about others, where my child life, and it kind of makes sense too. My child life is about me. My previous life was about me, where my new life is about others, right? And it's
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So you just brought up like step 3 is turn my will and my life over to the care of God.
Yeah.
So people are like, whoa, what's the will of God? Well, if you know what your will is, it's probably the opposite.
Pretty
so you're
much.
just saying like my will is about me,
Yeah.
and God's will is about other people.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Right, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is one of my favorite lines, and it says much of our spare time is spent in this sort of way, and that's helping others and working on myself, making myself a better person, and helping others. So much of my spare time, I have my work life, and I have my family life, and then I have my spare time. And how much is much of my spare time? It's 3/4 of my spare time. 4/5 of my spare time is spent in that sort of way, and that's my life, right? And it's a wonderful. Like I'm getting a chill actually thinking about it, because it's a way to live, right?
So then, what do you do for work? Like, you have this work life.
Yeah,
what is that work life?
Well, you always ask questions. You know the answer to.
I know the answer.
I was going to say that earlier. So now I'm working at a treatment center, a Christian
What did you
treatment
do
center.
3 years ago?
I was doing drywall. I worked as a drywall contractor. I was making a ton of money, and I was very happy with that. And
Okay, wait. You said you work at a rehab center now.
I work at a rehab center now.
Okay, but you're a drywaller, and you
Yes.
have a grade 10. So, like, did you go and get a doctorate? Did you take a psychology degree? Like,
I did. I had a doctorate in spiritual awakening.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So it's a great question, right? So I'm a grade 10 dropout. I've been a crackhead I hate calling myself a crackhead, but it's true. I've been doing drugs and thinking to myself and stealing and lying for 20 years of my adult life since I was 16, right? And then I get 6 months sober, and I get asked to work at this treatment center, and it's like, it's unheard of. One of the guys in the treatment center had more sobriety than I did, right? So,
That's humbling, eh?
Well, it is very humbling.
That's how you destroy ego.
But the best part about it is him and I are great friends today too, right? And he credits my presence as I helped him to get through the program, right? So that's part of the spiritual awakening, right? I wasn't the one who got the job God got me the job, and I've been working there ever since. And so where it's funny, much of our spare time is done in this sort of effort. I get my work time in it too, but that doesn't count from my
So they're
recovery.
actually paying you.
Yeah, I guess you call
Does
it.
Does it pay as much as drywall?
It pays 1/10. I'll tell you this story. My sponsor is actually the director of the treatment center. That might have helped me get the job, but I think it was still.
Put in a good word.
I still think it was mostly God. So he for years, I used to hurt myself. I got back pain, and I used to hurt myself once or twice a year and not be able to drywall for a couple of weeks. And he always told me, he said, maybe you should think of something else. And I was too prideful, and I was too stuck in self, and I was making $70,000 a year. So I'm like, there's no way I'm ever choosing something else. And then I was in prayer one night, and God said, maybe it's time you choose something else. And I said, okay, God, open doors for me, right? You know, we need you to open a door for me. And literally the next day I was in Harvey's, and I used to work, I worked in the restaurant field, right? I used to work at the Swiss Chalet. I love the job. And I'm looking over across the cash, and the manager comes by and says, what are you looking at? I said, I used to work here. He says, well, do you want a job? I said, no, you don't pay enough. The day after I start this prayer, I go to my bed that night and I pray, God, can you please just open doors for me? And he's like, really? Really? I just opened this door for you, right? So the next morning, I'm in my car and I'm driving back to Swiss Chalet, and I call my sponsor on the way over, and I said, "Look, I'm finally going to humble myself. I'm gonna quit drywall, and I'm gonna get a cheaper paying job, and I don't know where it's going to lead." And he said, again, I believe it, but he said no word of a lie. Just that morning, he was in the shower, and he said, God put on his heart to hire me at the treatment center part time. So the same day that I finally humbled myself to go get a new job is the same day that. This man had put on his heart to go. What's even cooler is I'm still selfish, and I'm still greedy, and I'm still a prick. So he was going to offer me a part-time job, and it was going to be starting in 2 months. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do drywall until then, and I'm going to do drywall on the side. I'm going to drywall 5 days, and I'm going to do the rehab treatment 3 days. And God was like, he's telling me no. He's like, he told me, well, Kevin. Just let his name out. Kevin, my sponsor, also told me, he said, that's not going to work. He says, you can't do both. You got to choose one or the other. And God kind of put the same nudge on me. So I kind of prayed to God. I said, because I knew myself too. I'm like, you're right. I'm going to choose drywall 9 times at a time. I'm going to choose drywall over this job. I make some money. I need money.
It's almost like you're powerless.
Right? Over making the right choice
to make the right choice and to work. Right. Because if you're making the choice, then you're going to get your results.
That's a bang on, because it's a spiritual malady, right? So this is my malady that wasn't in remission, wasn't reminiscent.
You're explaining the battle like that we all go through on a daily basis. And it's not like you're recovered. So we're not recovering one day at a time, but there is this concept of one day at a time. Every day you wake up, and I know for me, I can fall into self-pity really quick. And especially with COVID, it's like, another day. And that's self-pity. Yeah. And that's what's going to lead me into becoming spiritually sick and looking for other solutions. Yeah. It's beautiful how you say it. And I just want to make mention that it's cool that he thinks about you in the shower. Like that's awesome.
That's great.
I hope you can return the favor one day. And hey, I've been thinking about you. I was showering, and I have a job for you.
Well, I think I'm going to quit this job now. Let me finish that story once quickly, right? So that night, again, I'm not powerful. I didn't have the power to make the right choice. So I prayed a different prayer that night, and I asked God to close the drywall door for me. I literally asked that prayer, scary prayer. And 2 days later, I hurt my back and I was out for 3 months. I couldn't lift a drywall board for 3 months. And in that time, the job came up at Jericho. And I remember my first shift, it was a night shift on a Friday night, and someone came in the office with a problem and left feeling better than he came in the office. And after he left, I started crying, and I realized my purpose. Like I realized, I could make $70,000 a year, or I could help one guy a year, and like the different kind of rewards, different kind of payment, right? And I was like, wow, this is what I'm living for. What have I been doing my whole life? And got on the poor me a little bit, but then realized that drywall wasn't anything I wanted to do long term. Man,
we're all tearing up here, man. That's good. That's good, because I've had those moments as well. And so I've come to understand, and I've worked in the same ministry that you're in for 10 years. So I know that well, and I'm on the board today. And so I am in contact with you guys on a regular basis. But it's just, we don't get a chance to sit down and talk like this. But I realized when I finally, to stay sober, I had to give up my will of what I thought I could do to pay my bills. Like, just simple stuff like that. And then I started working with at a care home that the treatment center's at now, and it was 12 guys or 11 guys in there, and they all have a mental illness, and I just came and I gave them meds and gave them food and tucked them in at night, and I was like, this isn't a job. Like, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
Like, this is helping me recover, and through that process and the responsibility of doing something for other people actually helped keep me sober and stop thinking about myself. And I just thought, like, God knows me better than I know me. Yeah. So stop making, I got to just stop this of going like, whoa, what am I going to choose today?
Yeah, now you're making us tear up too. So that was a beautiful story, John.
It's beautiful. Man.
It's true. It's a life, right? But
then what's your resume look like? Like, if you gave me your resume, what would you be hired under? Like drywall, trades?
Therapist.
Yeah. Drywall.
Now you can put...
I don't got a resume, but I would have to put God on my resume, literally.
Yeah. So that's a beautiful thing.
Recovered addict, child of God, counselor at a treatment center with side skills in drywall.
Whew, that's beautiful. Yeah. So, and that, like, you're explaining getting this new life, and God's not an add-on. Recovery's not an add-on. You're not getting pain relief. You're free, and you have a new life because of recovery.
Right.
And because you threw your hands up, because you gave up what you knew to be your truth, and now you have God leading you and awakening you and bringing you into a whole new. And I know where you're at because I've been there. I was there for 8 years, and I know, like, finally I graduated rehab. Like, you're kind of stuck in rehab right now. At least you're getting paid. But, I know that somebody comes to the door to drop off mail or a package, and you answer to the door, or somebody else or a client answers the door. They don't really know who lives there because we all look the same.
Right.
But you're there, and I know that why I was there. My experience was there to learn and grow and to become stronger and become more awake in certain areas that I wasn't. So congratulations on the job, and you just gave an announcement. Can you talk about that a little bit?
An announcement?
Did you get a better, like, did you get a promotion? Did you get more?
It's under review.
It's under review. You have a
sure.
review today.
Yeah.
In 10 minutes.
A review going in today. Yeah.
That's
but
good,
did the board member knows there's something coming? Is that what's going on?
No. I thought you got moved to days or.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I'm working full-time days now. It's not really
I'm
anything.
not.
I like how you said that though too, right? Because so I could answer the door when I'm working there, and you could relate to like we're the same. Like there's not really a staff and a client. There's an alcoholic and an addict who is trying to better her life, better his or her life, his life in this case, right? But. And one thing I say, my first year working there was one client, so it's a 9-month program, right? And he graduated 9 months later, and this guy grew so much, right? But I could literally look at him and say that I grew more than you. Like I grew more than him in that year than he grew, just being there with those guys, right? And although it's a job that we get paid to do, we would do it for free.
Yeah, and it's keeping you sober. Like you don't answer the door in your like lab coat and your stethoscope.
I don't have a stethoscope.
But you look the same. I know that when I worked there in the capacity at the care home, like I know it was a fine line of who worked there and who didn't, and that's where my mind was. But it's the same idea where we actually, we look the same as somebody in early recovery. We might act different. We might see things different. We're wide awake, and we're actually helping other people into the same path. And that's the beautiful thing is that we actually build a line of transmission. And that's what a doctor doesn't have.
Yep.
I remember being in treatment, and where I went to treatment, it was very confidential, so no one could talk about no counselor could talk about their past or anything. You didn't know anything about anybody leading it. But there was one guy that I could pick us out pretty easily. And so I went to him all the time with my issues or my questions, and it was all new to me. So I was like, what's a AA meeting? What's a sponsor? And what is all this stuff? Because I knew that without even knowing his story, I knew we had a line of transmission that I didn't have from anyone else.
Right.
And that's the beautiful thing that we have, and we get calls all the time. I get emails all the time, messages all the time with Ashes to Rubies and church stuff, is, can you talk to my son?
Right.
I'm like, why? Like, because I got a PhD or what? Because there's no hope. And so could you give my 20-year-old kid hope? Yeah. Or could you guide us and direct us? What do we do? That kind of thing. Yeah. So you
can do it.
We have that line of transmission that you can't get anywhere else. Right. So that's a beautiful thing. Yeah. And that's what we want to do with this podcast is have that available for people to really understand what the problem is, what the solution is, what our options are, and beautiful thing, man. What else we got?
I don't know. And just add one more thing to it.
Yeah.
Like we talk, I'm a grade 10 dropout, right? I'm a construction worker, and now my life is helping others and caring for others. But that life is open to everyone, right? You don't have to be an addict to do that, right? And that's I think that's one of the problems with this world is not the world, sorry, maybe some of the people in this world that they don't see that as a life worth living when it's really the dream life.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Yeah, we're supposed to get the occasional amens over there, right?
Man, no, it's encouraging just to hear your story though, and just like the ease and comfort that you would have got from drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. Now it's like you've actually connected to God. You've connected to a power greater than yourself, and it's like now you're getting ease and comfort from that.
Right.
You know, and it's like, and it could be even broader than that. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol. It could be something else for someone else. Right. But it's like that you're actually connected into this power, and now you have access to this power. Yeah. And then to see you, you know, after, you know, would you have guessed, you know, that you'd be, this is where you would be. And now you have an 11-month-old son and you're married. And like, and just to think of the actual impact you have, not even with the treatment center, but just like your immediate family. Right. And what does that speak to? And what does it say to you about your parents? And like,
yeah, that's what I want to say too. You don't have to work at a treatment center to tap into that power and to help other people, right? Like I'm blessed that I have that job, and you're blessed that you have a platform to work on it too, right? But this life that we love so much is open to anyone who wants it, right?
It's true. Yeah, that's what I say to guys like, whoa, what do I just, you're just saying quit your job. You know what I say is like start helping others first. Like have the message, have the process, and then God's gonna bring you people. And when there's too many people, then think about quitting your job or transitioning or let God guide you. Who knows? Yeah. But if we're holding on to all this stuff that we've learned or our addiction has built our lives, and we're still holding on to that stuff, it's we get our results. So it's beautiful to hear you have a new life. Yeah. Congratulations. And you're there to see the miracle of your child being born, and you get to witness the miracle of seeing a little person grow, and you get to be an influencer. Right. You're a creator, an influencer, and being a useful tool by God, and not being a consumer. You're being fruitful. You're giving back at all levels, man. At all levels. That's cool. It's really encouraging.
Right on.
Right on. Right on.
Let me go get my promotion now.
All right, you gotta get on the grind, back to work, and thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for doing this. This is awesome.
Have a great Christmas.
I'm not gonna lie, I was super excited to come and be a part of the line of transmission.
Right on.
It's a life. It's a life.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right.
That's it. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.